Yes, friends. In this video, we will discuss about the macro. What is the uses of macro? What is Excel macro and why are Excel macro used in Excel file? Right? That is 2 points. What do you mean by the Excel macro? Excel macro is a record and playback tools. Here is a recording and playback tools that simply record your Excel tab. Here is macro is available and simply record your Excel tab. The macro will play back it back as a many time as you want. VBA macro is also available. Visual Basic macro is also available, and you can use this your task. You can use this macro. Why are Excel macro used in Excel? As a human, we have some habits. There are certain things that we can do on daily basis for some calculation, for some VAT calculation. Every working day would not it's better if there were some magical way of pressing a single button and your routine task, your routine work is completed, right? At that time we will use the macro. Macro is a particularly repeated when you are using your repeated work you do repeatedly. You can record your macro to automate those tasks. Macro is an action or set of action that you can run as a many time as you want. When you are created macro, you are recording your mouse click and keystroke. It means that whenever you are recording the macro at that time, there is a two-way you are recording the macro. First is a keyboard shortcut key and second is a mouse shortcut key. You can use the both the way of the recording, but first is a shortcut key. Shortcut keys mean that Control S, Control A, they all are the shortcut key. Otherwise, else you can use the button. Also, this is called the button. You can use the button also. This is a mouse click. You can click here and macro is run. Then you can do the another way, right? Now, how to do with this functionality with using of macro? View, then the record macro. First we can recording here as well as we can record here also. Here is a macro 1, shortcut key, short macro name and description. Macro name, shortcut key, you can use this macro. So you want to use this macro on the basis of this macro. So we want to use this macro and we do the macro in this parameter also. Macro 1, then control, then the store macro in. So we can storing this macro with using of shortcut key. First is a macro name. If here we will store this macro is, for example, if I am store this macro first space second, for example, we don't want to shortcut key. Description is, for example, first trial macro, first use macro. Then okay. The name that you enter is not valid, so it will be not a valid macro. So if you use this macro, on the basis of this macro, we want to create a particular file. So if you want to create this file, we want to create a particular file. On this basis, we have to find out the value. So make sure that if you want to use this value, uh, find out the value on the basis of the macro. We want to use this file. So we want that name is not contain this macro. We want to create a first macro. With using a first macro, this is the shortcut key. Shortcut key, if I am using the shortcut key, then we can use the shortcut key. And if you want to first control key, then use this value. If using macro here also, then the macro name, shortcut key, store macro in and description here also.
So we want to description here also. So macro name, shortcut key, store macro and description also. So we can create the macro on the both the way. First is this way and the second want to create it this way. View macro, here is all other macro is available. That is called as view macro. Relative reference macro and physical reference macro is also available. Relative reference macro is available from the relative value, and physical reference value is a store for the physical reference data. So make sure that physical reference value is a stored in on this way. So we have two particular criteria on the basis of the use relative reference value. With the use relative reference value, we have to two reference. First is a physical reference, second is a relative reference. So we can use on both the way, physical way as well as the relative way. Record macro, macro name is one. Shortcut key, if I use the shortcut key, this is shortcut key is for caps lock on. We want to use the control plus shift plus K value. Why we use the shift key? If you use the control and K value, that is not okay. You can first use this shortcut key. If any shortcut key is used in the Excel, at that shortcut key we cannot use in a macro. Otherwise else it will be work in a not a both the place, it will work in a one value. If value otherwise else macro, otherwise else it value the particular functionality. In a Excel, all the shortcut key is created with using of shift caps lock key. So make sure that any shortcut key you want to create it is without of using of caps lock on. So we want to using this caps lock on and off value. So we want to use this. Now, if you want to use this value on of this workbook also, description of this value, on the basis of description of this value, we want to use this value. Description of this value, we want to use this value. Description of this two values. So on the basis of this value, we want to create it on the particular value. So we want to create a particular value on the basis of this one. We want to create a description of value. If we use the color macro, for example, I am using the color macro. If you are using a shortcut key, otherwise else you are created the button macro. If any macro you are saving this file, then file save as, here is a macro enable workbook. You can see here, this is a macro enable workbook. You can save this file on the desktop, consolidated this file. With using of consolidated this file in the desktop, you can save here. For example, if it is in a macro file, you can say, see that file, consolidated file here. Here is a symbol of the macro. If this file is not macro enable workbook, so at that time file is not properly saved from your side. So make sure that file is saving from your side is a macro enable file. So all the value is macro enable file. It is a very useful from your side. So make sure that if you want to use the macro enable file, it will be usable from the Excel file. Now, yes, you can see my screen here. This is a value for a, this one value. We can put out the value. If you are put down this value, we can see this file is extension from this file is dollar sign. This is your file. This is a macro enable file. You can see that file. So if you want to use this file, you want to share the particular file on macro enable workbook. Record macro here. This is a macro number 1. Control this workbook, personal macro workbook, and the new workbook, for example. If I'm using the shortcut key Control Shift U, this is a shortcut key, Control plus Shift plus U. This is our shortcut key. We cannot use the Control U because Control U, this is already available in the Excel file. Here is a called as a color macro. Here is a use for color macro. So you can use this color macro with using of this file. So we have to, this is color macro 1, Control Shift U, and this workbook. So this macro, what is the difference between this workbook, personal macro workbook, new workbook? This workbook, it means that this macro is run only for this workbook. It means that sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3, this is this workbook. The second is personal macro workbook and third is new workbook. Personal macro workbook, it's what? If I am using the personal macro workbook, if I want to share this file to another person, so that file is not a particular file we can share. This is our personal macro workbook only run on this PC. So it is called as a personal macro workbook. If I am using new workbook, so existing workbook macro is not work, new workbook macro is work. If I am using the this workbook, it's mean that if I am giving this file to another person, so he can run on own PC, it will be run that file. So at that time, this workbook is also usable. If I'm sending the my file to another person, at that time this workbook by default is this workbook. It's been that only for this Excel file it will be work. If I'm using personal macro workbook, that will be not run from the another PC. It will be my personal macro. So it will be run on my PC also. My PC only for my PC. It will be not used from another PC. So make sure that the macro is only run whenever you are using this value. If this using this value at that time, we will use this functionality. So make sure that you have to do this functionality, and we want to do this functionality on the basis of this one, we have to clear this value. So make sure that we want to clear on the particular value. So we want to clear about the particular functionality. The shortcut key is Control plus Shift plus U. That is the shortcut key which one you use in the advanced Excel file in the macro file. You want to use this macro with using of this file. This is called as a color macro. Control Shift U. If now it is clear from personal macro this workbook, and okay, if I'm pressing the color macro, record macro 1, caps lock is on, Control Shift U, and I'm write down color macro and okay. So now my cursor is here, and if I'm putting this the color value, so we want to color this value bold, italic, underlined, and if you want to change the font size, you want to change the font size also, you can particular changing your font size. So now you have to change your font size. So you want to clear this font size, so we have to clear idea about what is a font size, what is a value. So we have to clear this value. On the basis of this value, we have to use the easily for this value. Now make sure that this one is created from your side. Now this is a recording, here is a stop recording. Also we want to do is we're going to go for the view command. We want to go for the view command, and stop recording option is also available. We can do the both the way, we can stop recording here. Now our shortcut key is Control Shift U. At that time my cursor is going from that side also. Here you can see that our shortcut key menu is Control plus Shift plus U. Control plus Shift plus U. At that time, what can we can what do? Control Shift U. My cursor is here. Then put out the cursor there, and value is stored. So this is not a perfect macro. Which one we do? because we have not go for the next line, so it will be always coming from this line, it will be stored from this line. Then we will go for the record macro, macro number 2. Shortcut key is control plus shift plus jar. This is called as a color macro. And okay, here we will do for change of the style, change of the color, change of this value, and enter. Now it is working or not, or we will go for the wrong places. Now you can see that the shortcut key is what, macro number 2, option control plus shift plus jar. This is the shortcut key, control shift z. Now you can see here our value will be color formatting also, so value will be changed here. So in the first program, we will not press the enter. We will go for the same cell always. So it will be doing from the same cell also. In the second parameter, we will go for the next cell. So it will be go for the next cell and next parameter. So we will go for the next pair and next parameter. So it will be usable from the side. We want to do this side from the macro. On the basis of this macro, we will use the particular file. So we can do this file on the basis of this value. So make sure that we want to create a color macro. It will be put the color macro on first cell or second cell also. So we have to put this value on the first cell and color second cell also. See, this is called as a color macro. We can go for the next sheet also, and if it is any value in the this value, and control shift and z, if I am press the control shift plus z, you can see here this value, this is a format color, it will be changed. So make sure that every time value it will be changed, at that time you want to use this value on the basis of this one. So if you want to use this value on control shift plus a at any moment, you will do that. Now if I am changing the option value from control shift u to control shift I, another option I will put out that, because control shift u I don't remember this value, so we want to change this value. For example, if you this value is control shift z, if I am changing the shortcut key, you can create you can change the shortcut key here, control shift z, to change from control shift w, x, y, z, whatever value you are be changed at that moment, you can change this value on the particular this way. So now you have to clear idea about how to change the value. So make sure that you want to change the value on the basis of this one. The value format is also changed. So now if you are using control shift q, control shift m, whatever you value you are changing at that time, you will be change that. Here is a description is color macro for recording. For example, it will be do for this recording. It will be work from all open workbook, this workbook, consolidated workbook. You can use this. If you want to edit this macro, yes, if you know about the VBA, you can edit this macro. But if you don't know about the VBA, you cannot edit this macro. You have simply, then how we will, if any changes, how we will do, we cannot do this value. We cannot only delete this macro. So if it is deleted macro, the macro is not available from your side. So this is called as macro. Here is a shortcut command of the macro. We can use this macro. Option quick access toolbar. If I'm putting all command, here is a all command. All the macro is available. If I'm using customized ribbons, we want to add the customized ribbons. If I'm going to quick access toolbar and going from popular command, command not in ribbons, for example, macro not in ribbons. So command not in ribbons. If the command popular command, if a popular command, for example, macro command is not available, the popular command also. So if you want to create all commands, Then all command is come here. Here is a macro security, macro VB informations. This all other command is useful. We can add from basic part also, and it will be available on the tab. And this is your shortcut key. It will be available also here. So we want on both the places. Now, macro you are using with table, macro you are using with filter part. You can use the macro and macro using at any place, whichever place the command is repeated at that time you have to use the macro. Whichever place we can do the repeated task every time, at that time we have to use this macro. So if you want to use this macro, on the basis of this macro, we want to use this particular macro. So we want to create this macro on the free span also, and we want to create that macro also. And if you want to add it and step info, and if you want to run this macro, then we can run this. All open workbook only for this workbook or consolidated workbook. You can select the particular value. On the basis of this value, we have to add the macro value. Macro is what? Macro is one type of work of robot website. Roboting website, you have two particular value. On the basis of this value, we have to put out the value. And on the put out the value, we can change this value from the every side. So we can create this value and we have to create on the particular manner. So we want to create this value about the all open workbook, this workbook or consolidated. But this macro is only working from this workbook also. So it will be work on this workbook. This is a color macro. We want to use the color macro also. Here we will add it this macro, the color combinations. We can add this macro. So we will adding this macro. Now use relative reference here. Relative reference basically works when the data is going from the next line. Next line, if the data is storing part at that time, relative reference macro is usable. Next line, it will be stored from the which side? The data we will go for the next line. So it will be stored from the next to next line. You will be stored from this side. So it will be using from use relative reference macro. So at that time, you will be use the use relative reference macro. Which one places you have to store your macro. Then you have a particular data validation with using of macro, consolidated with using of macro. But make sure that position it will be not different. At that time, you will be use this macro. For example, if I am using 10, 20, 30, and 40. Now we will go for the view tab, go for the record macro. This is called as a sum underscore macro. This is this workbook. We want to use the shortcut key and OK. Now, if you want to use the auto sum value, this is a sum value. Now the stop recording. Now you can see here, I will use the which one shortcut key we will use in this macro. Sum macro option control shift and W. For example, if I'm pressing here control shift and W, you can see the value is 0 and the cursor is here. Now, if I want to press the 70, 80 and I press control shift and W, you can see this is a main difference between the macro. So at that time, which command you will be used? At that time, you will be used the VBA. So VBA is basically work from what? VBA is not store the particular location. So at that time, we will use the VBA. On the basis of VBA, we have to store the particular value on the particular moment. So make sure that all the data we will store on the particular position at that time macro is working. If I'm here is press the control shift W. Yes, it's definitely work from this side, but it is a total of 190. 190 total is 20, 30, 40, 100. 10 is minus. 10 value is minus this value because this is a next location of this value. At the next location it will be a particular value on this basis, so we have to total of this value. On the basis of total of this value we have to total the particular moment, so we have to clear it this moment and clearly file the data from the next line. So we have to clear that moment and total for this value. Here we will use for control shift and W. So we will use 470. This is control shift plus W. This is 470. 50 it will be minus. Now you have to clear idea about that one. Why we use the macro. Position is same, then we will use the macro. If the position is not same, position is different, at that moment you will be not using macro because macro have a some limitation of this file. So whenever the limitation of the particular file, at that time we don't use this functionality. We want to use the particular file. So make sure that we want to use this particular file. At that time we want to use the data file also. So make sure that if any data file is not available from your side, at that time you don't use this file. So now the total, if I'm doing here average, minimum, maximum, all the functionality we will use here. But macro functionality is basically best functionality whenever you are using the advanced filter, filtering up option, because they are fetching up the multiple data. So at that time we can use that is best option. But in other way we cannot use this functionality, because if I am using this functionality on another function, so it will be not a particular work from this side. So make sure that if you want to use the sum function on that way, then we can use this filter table. Table has the same functionality. If the table of the particular one line to another line, we can use this functionality. If I'm not one line to another line, we cannot use this functionality. If any macro, this macro is available from your side, here we can also show the macro also. Option, then quick access toolbar. Here is all the macro command, and macro 2 and some of the macro is available. If I am adding this macro here, we can add this macro. If I am create any shortcut key from this macro, we can shortcut key. We can create the button also. Here we will using from the button also. This is insert and shape. If I am pressing the smiley shape here, we can press this smiley shape and assigning this macro. This is a sum of the macro. We can assign the macro here. We can do easily from this. We can add adding in the shape also, so we can create our own shape also. But make sure that we have only two options. If this, why we use the shaping particularly, because the shortcut key is not remember all the places all the time, because Excel have a lots of shortcut key. So if I'm remembering remember the Excel shortcut key, so we have forgot the macro shortcut key. So at that time we have a create a button. If I'm create the button, so macro store in the particular location at the same place the macro store in your position. So if I'm storing your position is on best way, so we can create your own function. So we can create your button with a VBA, with a submit button. We want to create our own form. At that time we want to create a macro. So we don't want to create a macro, we want to create a button at that time. So we want to create the button. If I'm going from the shape effect, this is a solid shape effect. For example, if it is a solid shape effect, if it is a 3D rotation, if I'm doing from the 3D rotation, this is a very excellent part of the Excel. We want to create your own form with using of VBA, with using of data value. We can create our own form, but make sure that you have to create your own shape on particular value. So we have to create our own shape. This is our own shape value. We want to create it this value. If I'm created particular own shape value, we want to create it this. So now we have to end of the session from here. Then now you will basic idea about the macro in the next session, next slide.